Friday, November 2nd, 2007. The small hillside town of Perugia, Italy was more quiet than usual. The small college town streets were usually filled with university students commuting to and from classes, or going to the various bars and nightclubs in the town center. But many had gone back home for the extended holiday weekend. The day before had been a national holiday, All Saints' Day. It's a Catholic holiday that celebrates all the saints of the calendar, known and unknown. Banks, schools, and businesses will close in observance. Many Italians will gather with their family and friends for a feast and to exchange gifts. The next day, that Friday, was All Souls' Day. While not a national holiday, many still observe it. It's a day to honor your past loved ones. It's tradition to visit their graves and leave chrysanthemum flowers. At around 10:30 that morning, 20-year-old American exchange student Amanda Knox returned back to her apartment to shower and change her clothes after spending the night at her new Italian boyfriend Raffaele Sollecito's place. But when Amanda arrived back home, she found the front door wide open. Now, she did live there with three other girls, two older Italian law students, Filomena Romanelli and Laura Mazzetti, and a 21-year-old British exchange student, Meredith Kercher. Amanda called out into the apartment to see if any of them were home, but received no answer. So she didn't think much of this and assumed one of them must have left the door open on purpose and would be back soon. So Amanda continued on into the apartment to take her shower, but noticed blood in multiple places throughout the bathroom. Still, she didn't think much of this and took her shower. Amanda apparently had no idea that she had just walked into the middle of a crime scene. Philomena's room had been ransacked and the window was broken. And a few hours later, Meredith would be discovered brutally murdered behind her locked bedroom door. Now, on the surface, it did appear Meredith was killed in a burglary gone wrong, but investigators immediately felt like something was off about the crime scene. They believed that the break-in Philomena's room had been staged, and that Meredith's injuries and other evidence at the crime scene pointed to more than one killer being involved. Just 4 days later, Amanda, along with her boyfriend Raffaele and Amanda's boss Patrick Lumumba, would all be arrested and charged with Meredith's sexual assault and murder. See, Amanda had given a false confession to the police, saying that she had let Patrick into the apartment that night and he had murdered Meredith. Patrick would spend 2 weeks behind bars before being released. His alibi for the night of the murder had checked out, and none of the DNA evidence at the crime scene came back as a match for him, but instead a different black man, 20-year-old Rudy Guede. Investigators' new theory was that it was Amanda, Raffaele, and Rudy who all killed Meredith in what's often been described as a sex game gone wrong. All three would be convicted of the crime. But after a 4-year legal back and forth, Amanda and Raffaele would be released, and Rudy remains the only person convicted of this crime. But even the court that exonerated Raffaele and Amanda state that Rudy couldn't have acted alone. No one else has been arrested for this murder, and in fact, no other suspects have even been named. So if Rudy had other accomplices that weren't Raffaele and Amanda, who could they possibly be? Is it possible he committed this crime alone? It's almost 20 years later, and we're still left asking the same questions that we were back in 2007. Who murdered Meredith Kercher? Hi guys, this is Jamie, and today I'm going to start telling you the wild story that is the Meredith Kercher case. What really shocks me about this case is with how well known it is, not a lot of people know how much evidence there is in this case. And another thing that really bothers me is in a lot of retellings, it almost feels like Meredith is an afterthought or sometimes even completely forgotten about, with the main focus being on Amanda. And also, since this is such a long and complex story, I know I will not be able to get through all of this in one video, so it will be a few parts. But hopefully by the end of this, we can untwist this tale, and who knows, maybe we'll be able to confidently say we know what happened to Meredith. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Meredith Susanna Cara Kircher, lovingly called Mez by her friends and family, was described as a beautiful, bright, outgoing, funny, and loved by everyone. Born on December 28, 1987 in Southwark, London, to her parents John and Arlene, Meredith was the baby of the family. She had two older brothers, Lyle and John Jr., but was closest with her sister Stephanie, only being 2 years apart. At 6 years old, Meredith began taking ballet classes at Parkson School of Dance, and her parents enrolled her in kids' acting classes at the local theater as well. At 17, Meredith began taking karate lessons at a club in Old Colston. After her death, Meredith's lack of defense wounds would be called into question, and many pointed to her karate lessons as proof she would have been able to defend herself to at least some degree in a life or death situation. John and Arlene would go on to divorce when Meredith was only 11. But John would say the first week after the divorce, as he was moving into his new apartment, 11-year-old Meredith left him a voicemail of her singing Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, something he wishes the phone company had never automatically deleted off his machine. Now, Meredith and her siblings resided mostly with Arlene, but they spoke with and saw John often. Meredith would go to John's every Friday after school for dinner. The two would hang out, he would cook dinner, and they would often watch Meredith's favorite show, Friends. He would say that she could watch the same episodes on repeat and never get tired of the show. Her two favorite friends were Joey and Phoebe. Now, John was a journalist and would go on to write a book about the case titled Meredith, which is where I got most of the background information on her from. It's a really good read, and if you want to get the Kercher's perspective on this case, I highly recommend checking it out. Meredith attended and graduated high school from the Old Palace School of John Whitgift, a prestigious all-girls private school in Croydon. At 14, she began taking Italian, and her class did a 2-week exchange program with Nadeau School, located in a small Italian town just 50 minutes outside of Naples. During the 2 weeks, she stayed with the family of one of the girls who attended the school. Now, Meredith had fallen in love with Italy at a young age. Before the divorce, her family had gone on vacations there. At the end of the 2-week exchange trip, many of Meredith's classmates were crying and sad to leave. But not Meredith. Her Italian teacher, Mrs. Mazzio, would say Meredith was smiling and told her that she wasn't sad because she knew she'd be back to Italy and that she was going to live there someday too. That summer, Meredith's host family invited her back again to visit. Some of her other classmates had been invited back by their host families as well. So John and Arlene agreed, and Meredith was off to Italy once again. After graduating from the Old Palace School, Meredith went on to study European politics and Italian at the University of Leeds. During her freshman year, she stayed in the dorms and made friends with many of the girls in her hall. Her sophomore year, she rented a house at 9 Brendendale Grove with 4 other girls. Now, none of them wanted to stay in the basement room, but Meredith selflessly volunteered and never once complained. It actually ended up working out pretty well for everyone because Meredith had taken up a job bartending at Revolution, a popular vodka bar. But the hours were late, so Meredith often wouldn't get home until the early morning hours. And having the basement room meant that she wouldn't wake up any of her other roommates coming in. Now, bartending wasn't the only job Meredith had while at Leeds. She had also signed up through a few promotion agencies. The work was freelance and they often placed her at the Gatwick Airport doing customer service. But through the promotion agency, she would also be selected to appear in the Christian Leontu music video, Some Say. After her death, Leontu would release the statement, "While I did not know Meredith and only met her briefly, I would like to send my deepest and sincere condolences to her family and friends while they go through this difficult and trying time. I can only hope the video gives some solace, as it does seem to capture her true beauty, grace, and charm." The video would provide a small piece of comfort to Meredith's loved ones. Stephanie, Meredith's older sister, would say that Meredith never really knew how effortlessly beautiful she was. Now, Meredith had a few short romances in her life, though not much is reported on. One of her boyfriends during her time at Leeds, Patrick Cronin, did give a couple of interviews. The two had met at a club in London, and after they broke up, they stayed in contact via Facebook. During the time that Meredith was in Italy, Patrick was in Australia. In 2006, Meredith began dating 19-year-old Lloyd Wright, a dance major at Leeds, and he taught breakdancing lessons as well. He had been at the university gym one day rehearsing a routine when he looked up and noticed a group of girls had started dancing. He saw Meredith and immediately thought she was beautiful. The two began dating, and it didn't take long for Lloyd to take Meredith on a weekend away to West Yorkshire, also known as Charlotte Bronte Country, to meet his parents. The two stayed at the Pondent House Hotel, which I have to say is super romantic. I cannot imagine a 19-year-old guy taking me on such a romantic getaway. It wasn't long before Lloyd felt like Meredith was the one. Shortly before her 21st birthday, he popped the question. Now, Meredith accepted the ring, but she didn't say yes or no. She held on to it for a couple of days before returning it. Meredith ultimately knew that it wasn't practical to get married so young, and she was also planning on spending the entire next school year studying abroad in Italy. Though declining the marriage proposal changed things, the two remained friends. Lloyd still attended Meredith's birthday celebration with her family at an Italian restaurant in Croydon. It was her 21st birthday, and Stephanie had a special cake made with a picture of 1-year-old Meredith on the front. This would be the last birthday her family would ever get to celebrate with her. Lloyd would say Meredith never really talked much about what she wanted to do after she graduated, but that she had her heart set on spending a year studying in Italy. And Meredith had actually structured her college course selections around being able to qualify for an accredited exchange program. And shortly before her junior year of college, Meredith would be accepted into the Erasmus program, which stands for the European Region Action Scheme for the Mobility of University Students. It's quite a mouthful, so Erasmus. Meredith would be spending her junior year of college studying at the University of Foreigners in Perugia, Italy. In the 1920s, Mussolini had established the university and another in Siena as a way to spread Italian culture throughout the world. Perugia is the capital of the Umbria region and is known for its medieval architecture, with Gothic cathedrals and walls surrounding the town center. Perugia's chocolate is world famous. The town is considered a chocolate capital, complete with a chocolate factory and a chocolate museum. They have an annual chocolate festival that Meredith and Amanda would attend together shortly after meeting. Perugia has a very rich culture, but it also had the reputation for being a party college town, thanks to being home to both the University of Foreigners and the University of Perugia. Perugia had an active nightlife with many bars and clubs, and it also became known for its drug use, specifically for heroin and weed. Drug dealers would hang out in the town center selling to the university students and locals. Now, drugs will come up quite a few times in this case. They were not hard to come across in Perugia. In September 2007, Meredith arrived in Perugia and checked into a hotel. She hadn't had any luck online finding a place to live. Now, through the Erasmus program, she had been given the option to either stay with a host family, in a dorm room with other students, or find a place on her own. Meredith opted to find a place on her own to rent, and she would eventually see a listing for a room available at Via della Pergola 7. It was an older L-shaped cottage that had once been a part of a farmstead. It had been renovated into 2 apartments that would often get rented out by college students. 4 Italian men roughly around the same age as Meredith rented the downstairs unit. Meredith looked at a room for rent in the upstairs unit. Philomena and Laura were already living there, and Amanda was set to move in later in the month. Meredith fell in love with the private terrace and the view. She would get her own room and share the bathroom across the hall with Amanda once she moved in. The rent was high for Parisian standards at the time, €270 a month, but it was better than all the other places Meredith had looked at, and it was in an easy walking distance to the university. So on September 10th, 2007, Meredith officially moved into Pergola 7. Now, Meredith was extremely social and wasted no time making friends. Before she even arrived in Italy, she had been emailing back and forth with other students who had been accepted into the Erasmus program. A group of them had met for dinner and immediately hit it off. And I want to note 3 friends that she had become especially close with: Sophie Purton, Amy Frost, and Robin Butterworth. These 4 girls would often spend a lot of time together, and in fact, they would end up being the last people to see Meredith alive. On September 20th, 2007, Amanda moved into Pergola 7, into the room closest to Meredith's. Amanda Marie Knox was born on July 9, 1987, in Seattle, Washington, to her parents Kurt and Etta. Kurt was vice president of finance for a local Macy's, and Etta was a school teacher, though their marriage would not last long. The divorce would be finalized when Amanda was 1, and Etta was still pregnant with Amanda's younger sister, Deanna. See, Kurt had begun seeing another woman, Cassandra, who he would eventually go on to remarry and have 2 more daughters with, Ashley and Delaney, who were only 8 and 12 at the time Amanda was arrested for her part in Meredith's murder. Now, Kurt and Etta did their best to give Amanda and Deanna a sense of family and lived only 5 blocks away from each other. Amanda and Deanna could easily go between each home. But Amanda would refer to her half sisters as the replacement children and drifted away from Kurt. Amanda and Deanna became closest with their mom, Etta. Now, Etta would eventually go on to get remarried herself. She would marry IT consultant Chris Mellis, who was over 12 years her junior when Amanda was 14. At the time, Etta was 39 and Chris was 27, which I have to imagine has to be a little bit of a weird authoritative dynamic for Chris as a step-parent, because essentially the same age gap between him and his new wife is the same age gap between him and his stepchildren. But who knows, maybe I'm just reading a little bit too much into that. Now, Amanda is described as quirky, athletic, outgoing, and studious. She would be accepted into the prestigious Seattle Preparatory on a partial scholarship, which is quite an academic accomplishment. Seattle Prep only accepts a limited number of non-Catholic students each year. Amanda wasn't Catholic, and she got a partial scholarship. She participated in theater and played soccer. Her quick reflexes on the soccer field would earn her the nickname Foxy Noxy, because she was quick like a fox. And after Meredith's murder, some tabloids would begin referring to Amanda as Foxy Noxy, but not because of her soccer nickname, but because that was Amanda's MySpace handle at the time. Now, like Meredith, during her freshman year, Amanda participated in a exchange program as well. She spent a few weeks with a family in Japan. From the trip, Amanda fell in love with travel and learning new languages. After high school, Amanda went on to study German, Italian, and creative writing at the University of Washington. There, she met and began dating DJ, short for David Johnstrud. When they first met, he had a mohawk and would sometimes wear a kilt in honor of his Scottish heritage. So during the time that Amanda was going to be in Italy, DJ was going to be on an extended trip to China. So the two decided to have an open relationship for the time being, but they did keep in close contact. Amanda would even message DJ from Raffaele's computer. Now, Amanda worked her way through college at several different jobs, one of which including a coffee shop. Amanda always felt like she was different from her peers, like she didn't fit in and that she hadn't really experienced life yet. So she decided, as a way to get out of her shell and find who she is, she was going to spend one of her years studying abroad in either Germany or Italy. And she decided on Perugia, Italy. She worked hard to save up close to $10,000 to pay for her year abroad. In July 2007, Amanda and her 19-year-old sister Deanna left to spend the summer with an aunt and uncle in Hamburg, Germany. Etta was from Germany and still had family there. Now, while in Germany, they would visit a museum in Austria, where Deanna would snap a photo of Amanda posing with a machine gun, a photo that many reporters would later portray along with salacious headlines about the case. In early September, Deanna and Amanda took a flight out of Germany to Milan, Italy, and then traveled by train to get to Perugia. Amanda needed to find a place to live during the school year before returning back to Germany to complete a short internship at Berlin's parliament. See, Amanda's uncle had pulled some strings at his job in order to get Amanda this coveted internship. Now, while on the train, Amanda and Deanna met an Italian named Federico who spoke zero English. He ended up getting a room at the same hotel as Amanda and Deanna and took the girls out for dinner. After dinner, Deanna went back to her and Amanda's hotel room, while Amanda and Federico went out on the town, smoked a joint, and then went back to his hotel room. In her memoir, Waiting to Be Heard, Amanda talks about Federico, but she gives him an alias, Cristiano, and leaves out the less than desirable details about him. He was actually a cocaine dealer that she had purchased drugs from. Her number was found in his phone, and it was showed that she kept in contact with him before and after Meredith's murder. Now, after Amanda had already been released and was back in the US, there was rumors that the Italian justice system would try to use Amanda's connection to this cocaine dealer as a way to try to extradite her back to Italy, but that didn't end up happening. In her memoir, she also talks about her next Italian fling, giving him the alias Mirko. Amanda describes her relationship as Mirko as non romantic and purely physical. They slept together a few times, and that the last time that Amanda hooked up with him, the entire time she just wanted to leave. And as soon as they finished up, Mirko told her that she needed to clear out before his sister got home. So, yeah, not romantic by any stretch of the means. Now, Mirko's real name is Ellis Pergna, and he would go on to sell his story to the tabloids after Amanda's arrest. He would say that Amanda was a man eater and that she didn't need any romance, as she was ready and willing to go to bed with him almost immediately. Now, I'm not telling you about Amanda's trysts in Italy as a way to shame her. I'm really not. I don't believe this is a safe thing to be doing. Amanda is a young girl in a foreign country going back to the hotel rooms and homes of essential strangers. Any of these men can be a complete psycho. But the reason I bring this up is because it is a repetitive behavior of Amanda's. And one of the complaints that Meredith and Amanda's other roommates will later have is that Amanda often brought back different men to the apartment. And I believe this is an important thing for us to acknowledge whenever we start talking about what the prosecution's theory in this case eventually becomes. Now, a lot of people always want to bring up that they just thought this was this satanic sex game gone wrong, which isn't entirely true. The prosecution's theory eventually becomes that Amanda, who was in the habit of bringing men home, brought two men that she vaguely knew back to her apartment that night, and that possibly they were all on drugs. Things got out of hand, and Meredith ends up murdered. So, again, I am not bringing this up to shame Amanda, and I know that a lot of tabloids did slut shame Amanda by talking about this stuff. That is not what I'm trying to do, but I do think that it is important for us to talk about what Amanda was up to in the weeks leading up to Meredith's murder, and if her behavior had anything to do with what happens in the story. Now, when Deanna and Amanda arrived in Perugia, they went to the university to look for listings for available places to rent. While there, they would see a skinny, beautiful Italian girl in a yellow tank top and shorts hanging up a flyer advertising 2 rooms for rent. The girl, Laura Mazzetti, showed them the apartment that day. They met the other roommate, Philomena, and Amanda would post on her now deleted MySpace that the two Italian girls smoked like chimneys. In her book, Amanda would describe weed as being as common as pasta in their apartment. Amanda fell in love with the place and agreed to rent one of the rooms, but she told them that she wasn't moving in right away. Her uncle, that she had spent the summer with, pulled some strings at his job and got Amanda a short internship at Berlin's parliament. So Amanda flew back to Germany and Deanna flew back home to the US. Now, Amanda would say that the work at the internship was pretty much non existent. She spent most of the first day reading from her German Harry Potter book. And on the morning of what would have been her second day, Amanda called in to say that she wouldn't be returning. She instead spent the remaining time walking around and sightseeing. Amanda quitting just one day after the internship ended up putting her uncle in a pretty awkward position at work, and in turn, got her into trouble with her uncle. On September 20th, 2007, Amanda officially moved into Regola 7 just before the start of the school year. At first, Amanda and Meredith spent a lot of time together. They went to bars, nightclubs, they hung out with their downstairs neighbors, and the two even attended the European Chocolate Festival together as well. Meredith had moved to Italy before Amanda did, so she kind of felt the need to take Amanda under her wing. Meredith introduced Amanda to her English friends, but they didn't get along. Amanda would say that she preferred to spend time with Italians, speaking the language. And Meredith's friends would describe Amanda as odd. Even though they all spoke English, Amanda would insist on speaking to them in Italian. One night while they were all at dinner, Amanda, for apparently no reason at all, randomly bursted out in song, drawing uncomfortable attention to their table. Meredith's friends would feel that Amanda just constantly needed to be the center of attention. Now, Meredith and Amanda would spend a lot of time with their downstairs roommates, and it didn't take long for them to notice downstairs neighbor Giacomo Salenzi. He was 22, Italian, and played bass in a band. Amanda was learning to play guitar and would sometimes practice with Laura and also Giacomo. Meredith's friend Sophie would say that Amanda had told Meredith at one point, I like Giacomo too, but you can have him. Meredith said the comment rubbed her the wrong way. She didn't need permission to date Giacomo, and she doubted Giacomo liked Amanda anyway. But to be fair, Giacomo's other roommates did tell Amanda at one point that Giacomo liked her too. Now, two female roommates both having an interest in a guy that lives in the apartment right below theirs can turn into some drama real quick. Giacomo and Meredith would end up dating and would share their first kiss at a nightclub called Red Zone in mid October and would make it official not long after. Meredith would confide in her friends that she really liked Giacomo, but felt like he wasn't so sure about his feelings for her. Whenever they were alone, he was super sweet, but whenever they were out in public, he would sometimes act as if he barely knew her. Which I have to say, they had only been dating 10 days before Meredith was murdered, so I can understand why he's not going to be super PDA about things. This was a very new relationship. Now, the first night Giacomo and Meredith hooked up and went back to his room, one of Giacomo's friends, Daniel, was in town visiting. So Amanda ended up taking Daniel back to her room for a one night stand. When Amanda and Meredith were hanging out with the guys in the downstairs apartment, they would often end up smoking weed with them. The guys were even growing 5 pot plants in a closet, but they would often buy pot or hashish from dealers in town. One dealer that they would purchase from was Rudy Guede, who they would also often play basketball with at the nearby courts. Downstairs neighbor Marco Mazan would testify in court that he played basketball with Rudy almost every day. Marco would also say that at least on one occasion, him, all of his roommates, Amanda, Meredith, and Rudy all smoked weed together. Now, Rudy had immediately shown interest in Amanda and started asking around if she was seeing anyone. This was before Raffaele was in the picture, so they told her no. On Sunday, October 21st, a group of people, including Amanda, Meredith, and Rudy, were all hanging out in the downstairs apartments watching the Grand Prix. Ferrari won that year. But Rudy started asking around again about Amanda, and one of the guys joked that he was going to end up sleeping with her sooner or later. While I wouldn't say Amanda and Rudy or Meredith and Rudy were well known to each other, they definitely weren't strangers. Rudy had also come into Le Chic at least one time while Amanda was working there. Amanda would say that she knew Rudy well enough to say hi to him if she saw him out in public, but not much more beyond that. And Rudy kind of echoes the same thing, saying that he didn't really know Amanda all that well. Another night, well, after drinking and clubbing, Rudy spent the night at the downstairs apartment at Pergola 7. It said Rudy fell asleep on the toilet after defecating. Rudy denies this and says that he did sleep over at the guy's apartment one night, but that he slept on the couch, that he didn't fall asleep on the toilet. This story really sticks out to me because later on, when Amanda first goes to her apartment the morning of November 2nd, she's not alarmed by the front door being opened, the blood in the bathroom. None of that bothers her. The thing that ends up making her feel like something's wrong with her apartment or that there was an intruder was poop being in Philomena and Laura's toilet. And that's what made her feel like something was off. And of course, that poop ends up being Rudy's. Now, who is Rudy? Rudy is the only person that is convicted of Meredith's murder, and many people believe he committed this crime alone, even though the Italian courts have ruled he couldn't have acted alone. The court that convicted him ruled that he committed this crime alongside Amanda and Raffaele. Rudy Herman Guede was born on December 26, 1986 in the Ivory Coast, a country located on the southern coast of West Africa. His mother abandoned him as a baby. At 5 years old, him and his father Roger came to Italy illegally by boat. Roger didn't provide a stable upbringing, coming in and out of Rudy's life. Rudy bounced around through the foster care system until he was 17, when he was adopted by a well-off family who owned the Liamatic Perugia basketball team. Rudy would practice with the team and became pretty good at the sport. His new parents did their best to try to help him by enrolling him in schools that he would eventually drop out of. They also arranged jobs for him that he would only hold for a couple months at a time, if that. In mid-2007, his adopted family asked him to leave their home. On top of everything else, they said Rudy lied constantly. Now, Rudy was known by his nickname, the Baron. Many have said due to him being a drug dealer. In his prison diary, Rudy would deny this, saying he never sold drugs, and he received the nickname because of Baron Davis, who played for the Golden State Warriors. Now, he did previously live with a family that owned a basketball team, and he played basketball daily. It's been reported by many news sources that Rudy was a known drug dealer in the area, and the guys in the downstairs apartment admit that they did purchase drugs from him. But at the time of Meredith's murder, Rudy didn't have a criminal record or any drug-related charges. In fact, he was the only one who didn't have a record. Back home in Seattle, Amanda had been ticketed for disturbing the peace after a party she had thrown had gotten a little out of hand. Raffaele had a possession charge after him and a friend were caught with some weed at a beach back home in Bari. Meredith had even been stopped once for public intoxication while at Leeds. Now, none of these are high crimes by any means, and this is not to say that Rudy wasn't getting into any trouble himself. In fact, Rudy was getting himself into a lot of trouble. On top of selling drugs, in the days leading up to the murder, Rudy had broken into at least 2 buildings. On October 27th, only 4 days before Meredith's murder, Rudy was apprehended after breaking into a Milan daycare called the Kindercare. The front door on the daycare was broken after a different break-in that occurred days prior, so the door wouldn't actually stay closed. You could just kind of push it open. Rudy had gotten off of a train into Milan the night before and had entered the daycare through the front door. The next morning, the daycare director returned to check on the building and found Rudy walking around inside. Obviously, she called the cops, and when the cops arrived, they searched Rudy's backpack. They found that he had taken a 40-centimeter kitchen knife from the daycare's kitchen, and they also found a laptop that he had stolen from a Peruvian law office back on October 13th. Rudy had entered the law office by climbing through a French window that overlooked a terrace. The police confiscated the knife, the laptop, and Rudy's cell phone. He was released and received orders to appear in court for his burglary charges. Now, the part about the kitchen knife is really chilling to me because after Amanda and Raffaele's arrest, they will eventually find a kitchen knife in Raffaele's apartment that is very similar to this one. It's not the same knife, but it's similar. And it is found to have Meredith's DNA on the blade and Amanda's on the handle. Now, a lot of people want to debate whether or not the DNA evidence for that knife is valid, and we will get to that point. But I'm just saying, to me, this is really chilling that this is only 4 days before the murder. A Peruvian man, Christian Tramontano, would later come forward stating that Rudy had attempted to burglarize his apartment. Tramontano stated that one night a burglar broke into his place and found him home. Tramontano traced the burglar to the front door, and when the burglar found the front door locked, he pulled out a jackknife and threatened Tramontano. The burglar was able to unlock the door and get away. Tramontano saw Rudy's picture in the news and recognized him as the burglar. Now, Rudy was never charged or convicted of this crime, so take it with a grain of salt. Now, earlier in the year, Rudy had been kicked out of his adopted family's home, and he hadn't had any steady employment since. So it appears as if he was supporting himself by breaking into buildings and selling drugs. Rudy had moved into an apartment on Via del Canarino, which was right off of Corso Garibaldi, the same street Raffaele lived on. A local internet blogger who reported on the case, Frank Sforza, would count that it was exactly 129 steps between Raffaele and Rudy's apartments. But though Raffaele and Rudy lived in very close proximity to each other, both agreed that they had never met before and they were not known by others to hang out. So if they did ever meet, it most likely would have been through Amanda. On October 25th, 2007, Meredith and Amanda attended a classical music concert at the University of Perugia. For reasons unknown, Meredith ended up leaving the concert early, but Amanda wasn't left all by her lonesome. There she met 23-year-old computer science student Raffaele Sollecito. His looks reminded her of Harry Potter, her favorite. The two would immediately become inseparable. Raffaele would say that Amanda began spending the night at his place from the first night they met, and had spent pretty much every single night since then at his place too. Raffaele was born on March 26, 1984 in Bari, Italy. His parents would divorce in the 90s, and he was raised by his mother, who would pass in 2005 from a heart attack. Now, his dad, Francisco Sollecito, was a successful urologist. Some news sources would refer to him as the urologist to the Dons. During Amanda and Raffaele's primary trial, he would arrive to court with personal security in an armored car. So, I don't know about you, but I don't know many urologists who need an armored car. And many whispered about the family's alleged relation to Rocco Sollecito, who at the time was an underboss in the Risotto crime family. In 2016, Rocco was murdered in an attempt to dismantle the older generation of the Risotto family. Now, on top of the alleged mafia ties, Raffaele's older sister, Vanessa, was a lieutenant in the Carabinieri, Italy's military police. She would eventually be deemed unfit to serve in 2009 due to her attempts to interfere in Meredith's murder case. Vanessa, along with other members of the Sollecito family, had their phones wiretapped, and they were recorded talking about trying to get different investigators thrown off of the case and talking about different political connections that they had that might be willing to help with their cause. Now, as an American, this is wild to me because as much as we like to joke about, like, oh, the government's listening in on us, Big Brother, in Italy, that's actually, it's a real thing. There is not a lot of regulations around granting warrants for wiretapping and criminal investigations. I've read that some Italians just always assume that they're being listened in on. Raffaele began studying in Perugia in 2003. At first, he stayed in a dorm setting, and he would be reported for the type of animated porn he watched. Some depicted bestiality, and his old dorm advisor would end up testifying to this at trial. Raffaele also had a fascination with knives and collected them. He was known to always carry a knife on him. In Italy, it is illegal to carry a knife just to carry a knife. You have to have a justifiable reason for it to be on you, like you're going hunting or fishing. And when Raffaele is eventually arrested for this crime, he actually has a pocket knife on him, which, again, not a good look when you're being arrested for taking part in a murder of a woman who was stabbed. Now, Raffaele was described as shy and quiet, and he didn't have much experience with the ladies. He had only had one fling with one other girl prior to Amanda, and he does consider Amanda his first girlfriend. Raffaele was also known to smoke a lot of pot. In a now deleted online post from before the murder, Raffaele would say he spent 80% of the time high. And remember, he did also have that small possession charge as well. Amanda would write in her prison diary that Raffaele had dabbled in harder drugs too. Once the school year began and classes started, Meredith and Amanda began to spend less and less time together. Meredith was busy with schoolwork, and most of her friends were a part of the Erasmus program like her. Amanda wasn't a part of any similar program. She had opted for an independent study program and just enrolled through various classes at the university. So Amanda ended up with a lot of free time, and she did also need a job to support herself as well. She had worked hard to save up close to $10,000, but that wouldn't be enough to support her for the whole school year. Laura had introduced Amanda to one of her friends, Huvie, who was working at a bar called Le Chic. Huvie and Amanda started hanging out, and Huvie would introduce Amanda to his boss, Patrick Lumumba, who had immigrated here from the Congo and had once been a part of a popular reggae band. Patrick would end up hiring Amanda in hopes that a pretty young American would help bring in more customers. Meredith and her friends had gone in to visit Amanda at work a few times. One time, Meredith and Patrick ended up striking up a conversation about a Polish bottle of vodka he kept behind the bar. Meredith had told him that the previous bar she had worked at used it in some of their specialty cocktails, which isn't surprising to me. Meredith did work at a specialty vodka bar. Another night, Amanda had brought Meredith to an employee party at Le Chic. While at the party, Meredith got behind the bar and made everyone 2 rounds of mojitos. Impressed, Lumumba offered Meredith an opportunity to bartend the next time he had a DJ playing, sort of as like a ladies' night special. Meredith happily agreed, but would unfortunately never get the opportunity to do so. Lumumba would say when he had first told Amanda about him offering Meredith the bartending opportunity, that the smile immediately fell from Amanda's face. She stood there silent, staring at him for a second, before just saying fine and stomping off for the rest of her shift. Now, to be fair, Amanda's employment at Le Chic's was a little rocky. At first, she had been hired to work every night, but it didn't take long for Patrick to cut her shifts down to just Tuesday and Thursday nights. She had originally been hired to kind of like pick up all the glasses, bust the tables. But he also ended up demoting her from working inside the bar to standing outside and distributing flyers. Patrick would say that Amanda was a terrible employee. She was more concerned with socializing and flirting than doing her actual job. Now, it wasn't long before Meredith started to complain about Amanda to her friends and family. She would say that Amanda was messy and didn't help out much with the household chores, specifically leaving their shared bathroom a mess. Amanda would store her vibrator and condoms in a clear case, and she would also forget to flush the toilet, even on her time of the month. Meredith would worry that someone would think that the mess or the vibrator were hers and not Amanda's. Now, the messiness became an issue with all of the roommates, and Philomena would say that they had to start doing cleaning shifts in order to make sure that everyone was doing their fair share. So, Meredith would also complain to her family and friends that Amanda would often bring back different guys to the apartment. Now, Meredith didn't think that Amanda was hooking up with all of them. Most of them were probably just friends. But Sophie would recall a time when her, Meredith, and some of their other friends were out drinking at a bar, and Meredith spotted a guy Amanda had once brought back to the apartment. And Meredith also thought Amanda had hooked up with him too. He was older, probably about 25, 30 years old, and Amanda had met him at a local internet cafe. He had come over to Pergola 7 a handful of times, and Meredith would say that he had been overly friendly, trying to hug and kiss both Amanda and Meredith. So the group of girls started laughing at the story and calling him Internet Guy. Internet Guy's real name is Spiros. He was from Greece, and Amanda had brought him over a few times. On October 30th, Amanda, Meredith, Philomena, and Laura were all chatting in the living room. Philomena reminded the girls that after the holiday weekend, rent would be due. Meredith chimed in saying that she had already taken the cash out and could give it to her now. Philomena told her to wait and that she would collect it from everyone all at once. The conversation then began to shift to Amanda's new relationship with Raffaele. Amanda was starting to feel some guilt over her boyfriend, DJ. Even though the two had agreed to an open relationship, things with Raffaele were starting to move quick. Philomena and Laura comforted Amanda and told her that long distance was hard. It's easy to get lonely. Meredith, on the other hand, did not agree. Meredith, being in a new relationship herself, told Amanda that trust and loyalty were the most important things. Meredith liked to kick back and go out and have fun, but at the core of it, she was serious. And Laura and Philomena described Meredith as being a very serious and sophisticated girl, especially in comparison to Amanda. Later that day, Laura returned back home to Rome for the holiday weekend. That afternoon, Giacomo went up to Meredith's room to hang out with her one last time before he went back home as well. Him and all of his roommates were from Port San Giorgio and had plans to take a train back home later that night. Giacomo would end up giving Meredith the key to his apartment and asked her to water their 5 pot plants and to tend to their cats. Now, the guys had a few cats, and one of them had an injured ear. After Meredith's murder, when their apartment is searched, they would end up finding blood throughout the apartment. And this would lead to a short term theory that maybe there were 2 different crime scenes, that maybe the murder started in the downstairs apartment and moved upstairs. But that was quickly debunked because all of the blood in the downstairs apartment ended up being cat blood. It was from the cat who had the injured ear, more than likely. Around 4:30 p.m., Meredith left for class, and at 6:30, Giacomo and his roommates took a train back home. The next day was October 31st, Halloween, and Meredith had made plans with Sophie, Robin, and Amy for all of them to dress up in Halloween costumes and go out to the various bars and nightclubs that night. Late that afternoon, Philomena returned home from work and started chatting with Meredith in the kitchen. Meredith told Philomena about her plans, and Philomena ended up lending Meredith some makeup to help complete her vampire costume. Not long after this, Philomena's boyfriend, Marco Zaroli, a different Marco than the one that lived in the downstairs apartment, came over and the three had some pizza together before each heading out. Meredith left to go meet up with her friends, and Philomena and Marco went to go see the movie, Ratatouille, and then ended up spending the night at his place. At 7:56 p.m., Amanda texted Meredith asking what her plans were for the night, if she wanted to meet up, and if she had a costume. At 8:04 p.m., Meredith texted Amanda back saying she was going to a friend's house for dinner and asked what she was doing. 2 minutes later, at 8:06, Amanda replied saying that she was heading to Le Chic and maybe that they could meet up later. Amanda ends the text saying, "Call me." Now, Meredith doesn't text Amanda back, and the two girls don't meet up. Meredith would end up telling her friends that she felt a little guilty for not doing so. They spent most of the night at Merlin's, a favorite of Meredith's. They stayed out until 4:30 in the morning. But not long before calling it a night, they ran into Patrick Lumumba. Meredith hadn't been back to Le Chic since the last employee party that Amanda had brought her to. Patrick had also heard that the two girls weren't hanging out together as much, and it didn't shock him. He had always thought the two to be polar opposites. Patrick brought up the idea again of Meredith bartending, and Meredith happily agreed and told him that she'd bring in all of her friends too. Now, that night, Amanda met up with Raffaele in the Piazza Gramana. The two had drawn on their face with marker in place of costumes. Amanda drew like a cat face, and Raffaele just drew like these abstract squiggles and shapes all over. The two parted ways, and Amanda went to Le Chic for the Halloween party, though she was not scheduled to work. Patrick would say that Amanda spent her time at the party sipping on the free red wine and chatting with 2 different guys. Amanda left Le Chic around 1 a.m. to go meet up with Spiros, aka Internet Guy, in front of Merlin's. They stayed at Merlin's, I guess, not too long because by 2 a.m., Amanda's meeting up with Raffaele in the town center and then ends up spending the night at his place. What I find kind of interesting about this is that Meredith had spent most of her night at Merlin's. So chances are when Amanda met up in front of Merlin's with Spiros, Meredith was probably there, but the two girls still don't meet up. Amanda also says that she never went inside Merlin's with Spiros, that they just hung out outside. So I can't imagine hanging just in the street outside of a bar for an hour. At around 2 a.m., Amanda meets up with Raffaele in the Piazza Gramana and then spends the night at his place. Meredith is the only person that sleeps at Pergola 7 that night. The next morning, Amanda returns back to her apartment to shower and change. Philomena and her boyfriend Marco arrive not long after. Philomena changes her clothes and she wraps a present for a birthday lunch her and Marco are headed to for a friend of theirs, Luca Altieri. They don't stay long and quickly head out. Philomena and Marco left before Meredith even woke up. Meredith didn't get up until around 2 p.m. that afternoon, and when she did, she still had on the fake makeup from the night before. Amanda would say that her and Meredith chatted in the kitchen for a little bit about what they did the night before. Then, not long after this, Raffaele came over. Meredith then went to go take a shower, start a load of laundry, and then left the apartment without telling Amanda and Raffaele where she was headed. They say that Meredith left a little bit after 4 p.m. Though I will say it's kind of odd that if Meredith and Amanda were just chatting in the kitchen about what they were doing the night before, I don't know why Meredith wouldn't just tell Amanda what her plans were also for that night. Now, Meredith had made plans with Sophie, Robin, and Amy to all meet up at Robin and Amy's apartments. Meredith and Sophie got there around 4:30 p.m. The four girls hung out, uploaded pictures that they had taken from the night before online, made a pizza, ate some coffee ice cream, and watched The Notebook. They were all still tired from the night before, so they chose to stick with drinking water and called it an early night. Meredith borrowed a school book from Robin, promising to give it back to her the next morning at their 10 a.m. class. Meredith was planning on going home and doing schoolwork using that book, since she was only borrowing it for the one night. Meredith and Sophie left Robin and Amy's around 8:45 p.m. and walked part of the way home together, before parting ways to each get back to their own place. CCTV footage from the parking garage across from Pergola 7 captured Meredith walking home. The video is timestamped at 8:42 p.m., but the clock was about 10 to 12 minutes slow, meaning it was really about 8:54 p.m. Meredith made it back home around 9 p.m. and started doing schoolwork in her room. During the 2009 trial, Raffaele and Amanda's defense attorneys would present the parking garage CCTV footage, stating that it also captured Rudy walking towards Pergola 7 shortly before 8 p.m., about an hour before Meredith arrived home. Defense's theory of this crime was that Rudy broke into Pergola 7 while no one was home, ransacked Philomena's room, and then he attacked Meredith when she was alone in her room. Now, the lower CCTV footage did not capture this man's face or his skin color, so it's really hard to say for certain that this is Rudy. But the prosecutors would end up presenting the upper level CCTV footage from the parking garage of this same man defense claims to be Rudy. The footage was grainy, but it did show the man's skin color, and he was obviously white and could not be Rudy. And this was a huge blow to the defense's theory at trial. Now, a woman resembling Amanda would be captured by the parking garage camera walking away from the cottage, timestamped at 8:53 p.m. With time adjusted, it's about 9:05, which would have been shortly after Meredith returned back home. Now, it's not confirmed if this is Amanda, and since this was only minutes after Meredith returned home, there wasn't enough time for Amanda to attack or kill Meredith, even if someone else had helped her. So, if this is Amanda, and Amanda did take part in this crime, she would have had to have returned back to the apartment again later that night in order to commit the crime. Now, while the CCTV footage from the parking garage across the street was very helpful to investigators, the camera did not capture all the comings and goings of Pergola 7. It was a motion sensor camera, and the footage was grainy at best. The camera angle only captured part of the cottage's driveway gate in the top corner of the frame. So, if Amanda did return back to her apartment that night, she would have most likely taken a different route back home that wouldn't have been through the parking garage. Like, for instance, maybe the stone staircase near the basketball courts. The stone staircase led out to the street Pergola 7 was on, and according to Google Maps, is only a 2-minute walk. Now, that night, 3 call attempts would be made on Meredith's English phone. The first one was at 8:53 p.m. to her mom, Arlene. Now, I kind of assume Meredith probably just called her mom on her way back home after parting ways with Sophie. The second call was about an hour later at 9:58 p.m. and it was to her voicemail. The third call was 2 minutes later at 10 p.m. to her bank. Now, the call to the voicemail and the call to the bank were not completed calls, so it is unclear if these calls were intentional or not, or if they were even made by Meredith. At 12:10 a.m., Meredith's English phone randomly connected to the internet for 9 seconds. Cell tower location now placed it in the vicinity of Via Sperandio, where both of her phones would be found the next day. Now, this really narrows down the timeline here because Meredith makes it home around 9 p.m., and her phones are already discarded at 12:10 a.m. So, whatever happened to Meredith happened after 9 p.m., and by midnight, the attacker or attackers have already disposed of her phones. And if you believe Meredith did not make the call to the bank or her voicemail, then that narrows down the timeline even more, because that means by 10 p.m., her attackers have her phones. Now, it's theorized Meredith's phones had ended up in the garden at Via Sperandio because someone either walked them down that street and threw them into the trees, not realizing that they were throwing it into someone's garden. The other theory is that someone threw them off an embankment at Parco San Angelo that overlooked the home. Parco San Angelo is a park near both Raffaele and Rudy's apartments. It's actually down the same street Raffaele lived on, Corso Garibaldi. Now, while this area is on the same street Raffaele's place was on, this is actually closer to Rudy's apartment. But again, Rudy and Raffaele's apartments are very close to each other, only 129 steps apart from each other, according to Frank the blogger. Now, 2 different neighbors who lived in apartments overlooking Pergola 7 would come forward stating that they had heard a single loud scream that night. Monica Antonella stated that around 10 p.m. she heard a man and a woman arguing in Italian, and then she heard a woman scream once. Now, Nara Capozzali, who lived in the apartments overlooking the car park, said that she awoke around 10:30 to use the bathroom, like she did every night thanks to a diuretic medication she was taking. Capozzali would say as she was walking to the bathroom, she heard a loud scream. She went to go look out her window and didn't hear or see anything. A few minutes later, while walking back from the bathroom, she could hear someone running up the metal stairs and then on the gravel road outside her apartment. Another neighbor, Maria Dramas, who lived on the same street as Capozzali, said she had gone to bed around 11:30 and had awoken to the sound of someone running on the gravel road as well. But Capozzali and Dramas report hearing running on the road about an hour apart from each other. Now, most people aren't keeping track of what time everything happens in their day-to-day life. And I can imagine if you're waking up at night and hearing a noise, you're not immediately checking the clock to see what time it is. So, one or both of these people could be off in time. Now, CCTV from the parking garage across the street would show that a car broke down right in front of the cottage's driveway that night. Timestamp shows it happened at 10:36 p.m., but with time adjusted, it would have been closer to 10:48 p.m. At around 10:40 p.m., Alessandra Formica and her boyfriend were walking back to their car in the parking garage. They were taking the stone steps near the basketball court when they were bumped into by a man of color. The guy was walking fast and kept his head down. Formica found the interaction to be rude, so she called out to the man saying, "Excuse me," expecting to get an apology. But the man kept his head down and was walking fast. Now, Alexandra is sure that this happened around 10:30, 10:40 p.m. because she recalls walking past the car that broke down. So, Rudy does admit that he was at the apartments that night, and his account of fleeing the apartment does match this. He said that he had blood on his jeans, so he was walking quickly back to his place, hoping that no one would notice it. So, I think this fits with the narrative. She most likely did get bumped into by Rudy. But if Rudy left taking these stone steps, then he could not be the person that Capozzali and Dramas heard on the metal stairs or running on the gravel road outside their apartments, as that was in the opposite direction. This led police and prosecution to believe that more than one person fled the home after the murder, each going in different directions. So, after Rudy flees Pergola 7, he gets back to his apartment, quickly cleans up, and then around 1 a.m. goes to Damas nightclub to meet up with a few friends, who all said he smelled and was acting weird. The next morning, Rudy took a train to Germany simply because that's where the next one was headed. Rudy would remain in Germany until November 20th when he was apprehended after being caught on a train without a ticket. Now, while in Germany, Rudy would use the alias Kevin Wade, and he would also use that name when applying for asylum in Germany as well. Now, probably just an unfortunate coincidence, on October 26th, so the day before Rudy broke into the Milan daycare, a man in Florida named Kevin Wade was arrested for plotting to kill someone in order to use their body for necrophilia. Um, Four people had been in the car that broke down in front of Pergola 7, and none of them saw or heard anything unusual coming from the home. Though those involved in the car breakdown say that they were too distracted dealing with the car to pay attention to really anything else. The tow truck driver Giampaolo Lombardo arrived around 11, and it took him about 15 minutes to have the car loaded up before he left. He also said he did not see or hear anything unusual coming from the home, but he did notice the driveway gate ajar and a dark colored car parked in the driveway, but outside of the gate. This car has never been identified, and some assume that it was possibly Raffaele's. He did own a dark colored Audi A3 at the time, and after his arrest, police noticed that it appeared to have been recently cleaned. But to go against this theory, the walk from Raffaele's place to Amanda's was only about 5 to 8 minutes, and he wasn't known to drive there. They would typically just walk back and forth. Rudy also did not own a car. A local homeless man and heroin addict, Antonio Caratolo, often hung out in the Piazza Germana, and the night of November 1st was no different. He sat on a bench near the basketball courts reading La Espresso Weekly magazine when he looked up and saw a young couple that he would later identify as Amanda and Raffaele talking quietly but animatedly to one another. They would keep walking over to look over the railing that overlooked the cottage and the street below. He recognized them because he had seen them around the town center before, but this is the first time that he had seen them together. And remember, Raphael and Amanda had only known each other 6 days at this point. He saw them multiple times throughout the town center that night, starting at 9 p.m., and they left shortly before midnight. Now, Curatolo is far from the ideal witness, having obvious credibility issues. He was homeless and a heroin user. But during his first trial, when questioned if he was certain if it was Amanda and Raffaele he saw that night, he confidently answered, "As sure as I'm sitting here." When asked how he knew this happened the night of the murder, he responded with he remembered the next day he saw all the police in white uniforms in and around the Piazza Romana. At around 1 a.m., Alessandra Samanesci was walking past the home when she heard a scream that turned into a strange laugh and other odd noises that she would describe as animalistic coming from the cottage. Which this creates an interesting point for our timeline because Meredith's phones are already at Via Sperandeo by 12:10 a.m. So then you would assume Meredith is already dead by 1 a.m. and the attackers have already fled the home. So it kind of makes you question if someone returned back to the apartment after disposing of Meredith's phones. On January 19th, 2008, about a month and a half after the murder, a questionable witness would come forward stating that he saw Amanda, Raffaele, and Rudy together outside of Pergola 7 the night of the murder, or the night before. His accounts of the interaction vary with each telling. Albanian immigrant Harukin Kokomani would say that either the night of October 31st or the night of November 1st, he was driving down the road that passed Pergola 7 at approximately 6:30 when he came across what appeared to be two black bags in the middle of the road. He slowed down and bumped the bags with his car's bumper, and that's when he realized it wasn't bags. Suddenly, a boy and a girl popped up, a couple that he would later identify as Amanda and Raffaele. Amanda was carrying a green colored army style purse from which she pulled out a large kitchen knife and held it with both hands above her head. She yelled at Kokomani, "Get out of here or I'll show you." Kokomani then rolled down his window and told her to go to hell. Raffaele responds back, "Leave it alone. What can a girl do to you?" After this, a black man that Kokomani would later identify as Rudy starts walking up from the guardrail near Pergola 7 towards them. Kokomani says Amanda then yelled to Rudy that this guy was Albanian. Rudy then yells at Kokomani, "What are you gonna do? I'm not Tutsian, I'm black. You can't do anything." Amanda then told Rudy and Raffaele to hide their faces, otherwise he'll recognize them. But Kokomani had already seen their faces. He drove off into town, and from his rearview window, he saw Amanda and Raffaele walking towards Rudy. Kokomani saw news of the murder and recognized Amanda, Raffaele, and Rudy as the people he had saw that night. Kokomani did not immediately report this to the police. He returned back home to Albania for the holidays, and when he returned back to Perugia in January, he spoke with a lawyer friend of his and told them the tale. He asked his friend to accompany him to the police station in order to give a statement. Now, about 4 months after Kokomani's first deposition, on May 29th, 2008, Kokomani would be questioned by lead prosecutor Giuliano Magnini and lead investigator Monica Napoloni. And he elaborates a little bit more on his story and explains why he didn't come to the police right away. He tells them that he didn't tell them the entire truth during his first statements. He admits that he actually knew Rudy from before this interaction. Now, Kokomani was a farmhand at Terra Rosa Farm, located in Elise, a suburb right outside of Perugia. He mostly helped with feeding and caring for the livestock, but he told Napoloni and Magnini that he had been waiting tables at the farmstead's restaurant when Rudy had come in on a few occasions. Now, for the reason why he didn't come forward right away, Kokomani tells them that he was scared. In the days after Amanda and Raffaele's arrest, but before Rudy was apprehended, that he was drinking at a bar in town when two fellow Albanian men came in and said that they were looking for another Albanian man who had seen everything the night of the murder. And they knew this because they had heard it from Raphael and Amanda. They were offering 100,000 euros to whoever could bring them this unknown Albanian. They needed to keep him quiet. Now, Kokomani immediately became scared. He knew that they were talking about him, and he started to think that they would do whatever it took to keep him quiet. So instead of going forward to the police, he goes back home to Albania. Now, Napoloni and Magnini asked Kokomani if he knew who these Albanian men were, and at first Kokomani says that no, he didn't know who they were, but he knew who they were connected to. They were connected and had been previously represented by one of Raffaele's attorneys, Luca Maori. And eventually, Kokomani does go on to name two different Albanian men in this interview, one of which he says was his cousin. If this is true, that's completely wild and also really makes you think about the mob connections that are rumored about in this case. And when it comes to Maori, this is not the first sketchy thing that's said about Maori. Raffaele also talks about Maori in his book Honor Bound, saying that he didn't really like him being a part of his defense, but his dad, Dr. Sollecito, insisted on Maori being part of the defense, and whatever Raffaele's dad wanted, Raffaele's dad got. Now, also during this deposition, Kokomani would say he was certain that this interaction had happened the night before, on October 31st, but when he drove past Pergola 7, he said he passed the home and noticed a car was broken down and a tow truck was in the street. But we know a car broke down in front of Pergola 7 the night of the murder, on November 1st. And if Kokomani drove past a broken down car in the tow truck, that makes you think that he's driving past the home around 11 p.m. that night. Now, also in this telling, Kokomani says that he actually got into a altercation with both Amanda and Raffaele. He says that after Amanda pulled the knife on him, he grabbed some olives from a bucket he had sitting in his passenger seat and he chucked them at Amanda's face. And when he said this at trial, the entire courtroom broke out in giggles. Kokomani has a crazy story. So after Kokomani throws the olives in Amanda's face, he says Raffaele then pulled out a smaller pocket knife and started threatening him too. Kokomani then punched Raffaele in the face, breaking his glasses. After this, Rudy walks up and starts talking to Kokomani. Rudy tells Kokomani that he knows him from the farm and that he also knows his cousin. Rudy tells him not to worry about the knives, that they were having a party and were cutting a cake. Kokomani says it didn't look like any party was going on at that home. He said he could hear a loud booming sound and a woman's scream coming from inside. Rudy told him not to worry about the sound, that it was music playing. But Kokomani insists that it didn't sound like any music he had ever heard. Rudy then offers Kokomani 250 euros to borrow his car from the night. Rudy told him that they needed to move some furniture. And at trial, he would say he actually purchased this car used for 300 euros. So Rudy is almost offering how much Kokomani paid for this car just to borrow it for the night. But Kokomani refuses to lend him the car and says that all three of them are pieces of shit and drives off. Rudy then yells to Kokomani, "I'll track you down. I know where you work." Kokomani yells back that he doesn't work there anymore. Rudy was left standing in the street, and Amanda and Raffaele started walking off in a different direction. Now, Napoloni and Magnini spent a good portion of the end of this interview trying to nail down if this happened on the night of October 31st or November 1st. But Kokomani was insistent that this happened on October 31st, and he wasn't sure about the time either. He would testify that the clock on his car was not correct, and he remembered the clock showing 6:30 p.m., and he had thought the clock was about 2 hours off, so that would put it around 8:30. But if he saw the car broken down and the tow truck, the car didn't break down until around 10:30, and the tow truck didn't arrive until around 11. So that really makes you think that he was there later in the evening. Cell tower location from Kokomani's phone did place him near Pergola 7 on October 31st at 10:58 p.m. and on November 1st from 8 to 8:04 p.m. Now remember, this is 2007, so cell tower location is not as complex or consistently tracking you like phones are today. So, cell tower location would not provide a running list of where you were or an exact location. Cell tower location at this time could only place you in the vicinity of certain areas. And it could only place you there if you had a phone ping, like you got a text message, phone call connected to the internet. Otherwise, it's not like your phone was tracking you from where you were at all times. Now, another thing that really makes you question Cocomani's credibility is that he would eventually say he had also seen Amanda and Raffaele together with Amanda's uncle at a bar in Perugia back in August. But this is around the time that Amanda hadn't yet arrived in Perugia, and she hadn't met Raffaele yet either. See, despite all the oddities and inconsistencies, prosecutors would put a lot of faith into Cocomani's testimony and list him as a super witness. But he ended up being a terrible witness for the prosecution. When reading the trial transcripts, most of his sections say incomprehensible just because he mumbled so much and his Italian wasn't the greatest. When he told the part about throwing olives at Amanda's face, the courtroom erupted in giggles. So he was ultimately ruled an unreliable witness, and his testimony played no part in Amanda and Raffaele or Rudy's eventual convictions. Now, I believe Cocomani's story is all over the place and doesn't make sense because he is most certainly lying. But I'm not so sure if he's lying about everything. Hear me out. Now, the tow truck driver saw the driveway gate ajar and a dark colored car parked in the driveway. Now, this car has never been officially identified, and a lot of people do think that it could be potentially Raffaele's since he had a dark colored car. But I just personally believe that Raffaele would have just walked to Amanda's. I don't think he would have driven his car there. But Cocomani also had a dark colored car. He drove a dark colored Volkswagen Golf. So, what if that car that the tow truck driver saw was Cocomani's? Though, in Cocomani's story, he claims that he just drove by the road in Pergola 7. He never claims to have pulled into the driveway. Now, another thing that kind of helps bolster this idea is that after Rudy is apprehended in Germany, he's held in a German prison, and in his prison diary, he writes down his account of what happened the night of the murder. Now, Rudy does give different varying accounts, and I will go into more of those in detail later on, but just for the sake of what we're talking about right now. In this writing, Rudy says that he had ran into Meredith the night before on Halloween. The two shared a kiss and then made plans to meet back up at her place the next night. He says that he arrived to Pergola 7 before Meredith, but noticed a white car with its headlights on in the street near the home, and that he also saw a drug dealer who often hung out on Corso Garibaldi near the cottage. He says once Meredith arrives home, the two go into the apartment. They kiss, fool around a little bit, but neither have a condom, so it doesn't go any further. He says after that, Meredith went to go check one of her dresser drawers and noticed her rent money missing and immediately assumed Amanda was the one who took it. Rudy says Meredith called Amanda a druggy whore and said she must have taken her money to go buy drugs. So Meredith then went into Amanda's room and checked her closet to see if her missing rent money was there, but didn't find anything. Meredith's fingerprints would be found on Amanda's closet door, indicating that she had recently touched it. Rudy says then at this point his stomach became upset from a spicy kebab he had eaten, so he goes to Philomena and Laura's bathroom and puts his headphones in. While he's in the bathroom, an intruder breaks in and stabs Meredith. In February 2009, around the same time he was set to testify against Amanda, Raffaele, and Rudy, Cocomani would be arrested for drug dealing charges. So, what if the drug dealer Rudy is referring to in his German prison diary is actually Cocomani? Amanda and Raffaele both admit that they do not remember much of what happened the night of November 1st because they had smoked a joint and gotten high, and it made their memory of the night hazy. So, complete speculation here. But if Coco Mani sold Raffaele, Amanda, and Rudy drugs that night, and then the three of them go on to commit this horrific murder, then yeah, that is absolutely a good reason for him to lie. And if he had actually been in the apartment that night, or he saw Meredith getting murdered, or worse, he took part in it, that's again an even bigger reason to try to lie and minimize his involvement and just not tell the full story. I think people lie for a multitude of different reasons, and most of them are for self-interest. He's not going to admit that he sold drugs to people who went on to commit a horrific murder. And if he had taken part in it or witnessed it, that's an even more reason to lie about what your actual involvement is. Now, let's get into Amanda and Raffaele's story. Amanda would say she last saw Meredith in the afternoon of November 1st, before Meredith left to go hang out with her friends. Raffaele had been over at the apartment at that time as well. Meredith took a shower, started a load of laundry, and then left the apartment without telling Amanda or Raffaele where she was headed. Amanda and Raffaele left shortly after Meredith did. The two took a small walk through town and then got back to his place around 5 p.m. The two hung out, and Amanda read to him from her German Harry Potter book. At 6:27 p.m., Raffaele's computer began streaming Aprile, which is 2 hours and 2 minutes long, meaning it would have ended at 8:29 p.m. if there were no ads or pauses. It was a slow night at Le Chic, so Patrick texts Amanda at 8:18 p.m. saying not to come in for her shift after all. Now, Amanda has maintained that she has always received this text message while at Raffaele's apartment. Amanda's story would change a few times, but in her book and Netflix documentary, she maintains that she stayed at Raffaele's apartment the entire night. However, during her 2009 trial, she would say that she couldn't remember if she had received Patrick's text before they started the movie or during the movie. But according to the timeline, he would have texted her within the last 20 minutes of the movie. And also, when Amanda received Patrick's text message, cell tower location wouldn't place her at Raffaele's apartment, but instead in an area near downtown Perugia that would have been on the route she would have walked to get to work that night. 17 minutes later, at 8:35 p.m., she responds back, "See you later. Have a good night." When this text message is sent, cell tower location now places her back at Raffaele's apartment. After sending it, Amanda deletes the text message from her phone and turns her phone off for the night. Now, Amanda gives two different reasons as to why she turned her phone off. First is because she wanted to save her battery for a trip her and Raffaele were planning to take to Gubbio the next day. And also, she wanted to have her phone off just in case Patrick decided she did need to come into work after all, he wouldn't be able to get a hold of her. At 8:42 p.m., Raffaele speaks on the phone with his dad. When later questioned, Dr. Sollecito would say Raffaele was doing the dishes during the phone call. After the call, Raffaele turned his phone off for the rest of the night too. Amanda would say the two cooked dinner together. They had fish and served it with a salad. In one writing, Amanda would say that she recalled Raffaele having blood on his hands that night. She assumed it was from the fish. Now, she only mentions this in the one letter and never brings it up again. Now, neither remember exactly what time they cooked and ate dinner. Some accounts say around 9:30, 10 p.m., and others say later around 11. But both maintain that after dinner, Raffaele did the dishes. But do you remember that phone call Raffaele had with his dad at 8:42 p.m.? Dr. Sollecito said that Raffaele was doing the dishes then. So did Raffaele do the dishes twice? Or did the couple have dinner much earlier? Now, Amanda was scheduled to work that night, and she didn't know that she wouldn't have to go in until Patrick texted her at 8:18 p.m. And as someone who used to work in the bar industry, you're typically gonna want to eat before you go in for a late night shift. So it would make sense to me that they would have dinner earlier. And one thing that I have noticed from a lot of Amanda's writings is that she gets very hangry. She often complains about being hungry at the police station and then only feeding her vending machine snacks. So I have a feeling that if Amanda had to work late that night, she wasn't going to skip dinner before going in. Now, Amanda says that while Raffaele was doing the dishes after dinner, one of the pipes under the kitchen sink broke and began to leak water all over the place. Raffaele immediately became upset. He had just recently had it repaired and it was already leaking again. Amanda calmed him down and told him that she'd go grab the mop from her place and clean it up the next morning. So I guess Raffaele didn't have a mop, or towels or anything that he could clean up this mess with. They were just going to let it sit on the floor overnight. Like, okay. So, in most of Amanda's writings and in her trial testimony, she maintains that the pipe under the sink began to leak water everywhere. But in an email that she would send to 25 people just 2 days after the murder, she would change the story a bit and say that Raffaele just accidentally spilt water all over the kitchen floor, and that's why they needed to grab the mop from her place, which is completely different than a pipe busting. Now, Raffaele's apartment would be searched on November 6th, so 5 days after the supposed leak. And when investigators checked the kitchen sink, they didn't find any leaks coming from it. Raffaele also kept a bunch of cleaning products underneath the sink as well. And none of them appeared to have been water damaged. Because you would imagine if you had a bunch of cleaning products kept underneath your kitchen sink and the sink just leaked water all over them, you would imagine that the labels on at least some of these products would be water damaged. None of them appear to be so. Now, to throw some more doubt on this supposed leak, Raffaele would write a letter on November 7th, and when talking about what time they ate dinner and the kitchen sink, Raffaele would say this: I don't remember what time I ate, but I certainly ate and Amanda ate with me. The questions asked by the agents of the Squadra Mobile made me remember that that day the water pipe under the sink had detached itself, and this fact made me very suspicious, since it is not possible for it to detach itself. In any case, the fact is that it flooded half the house. So, Raffaele admits that it is impossible for this leak to have happened, but anyways, it did, and it now flooded half the house. So if you were a bit dubious about this kitchen sink leak and wonder why Amanda and Raffaele are so insistent on this happening, the next morning, when the postal police arrive to return Meredith's found cell phones, they find Amanda and Raffaele standing outside of the cottage with a mop and bucket near the front door. So I feel like I can say with pretty strong certainty that this is just the first lie Amanda can think of to justify why she, the roommate who everyone said did the least amount of chores, would have the mop and bucket out the day that her roommate is discovered brutally murdered. So back to the timeline of what Amanda and Raphael are doing. Amanda says after her and Raffaele had dinner, they hung out, smoked a joint, played a game of making funny faces at each other, had sex, and fell asleep. Both Amanda and Raffaele maintain that their memories for the night are hazy because of the joint they had smoked. Both Amanda and Raffaele admit to being frequent pot smokers. Amanda had described weed as being as common as pasta in her apartment. Now deleted online post, Raffaele had said he had spent 80% of his time high. And he had also dabbled in harder drugs as well. So if this was just pot they were smoking, I would imagine they would each have a high enough tolerance to remember what they did the night before. Now, Raffaele would also say that he had been on his computer late into the night, checking emails and surfing the web. But the last computer activity was recorded at 9:15 p.m., the last keystroke being at 9:10 p.m. Now, Raffaele also says he spoke on the phone to his dad again at 11, but not on his cell phone, on his landline. There would be no record of this call, and when questioned, Dr. Sollecito denied the second call even happens. Now, during the trial, a Serbian student and friend of Raffaele, Joanna Popovic, would come forward and say that she had stopped by Raffaele's apartment not once, but twice the night of November 1st and saw Amanda and Raffaele both times. She said she stopped by first at 5:45 p.m. to ask Raffaele to drive her to the station to pick up a suitcase her mom was sending in from Milan. Joanna then left to go to a class. After the class, she returned back to Raffaele's around 8:40 p.m. to say that she didn't need the ride after all. Her mom wasn't able to send the suitcase. I am very skeptical of the Joanna Popovic sightings, and here is why. Because literally the next day, Amanda and Raffaele are giving their first statements to the police. And they don't mention anything about Joanna Popovic stopping by either time. In fact, they don't mention her in any of their initial statements to the police, and she doesn't come up until trial. Amanda also gives various written statements detailing what happened in the days leading up to the murder, the day of the murder, and the discovery after. And she goes into detail naming the most minor things, like her and Raffaele playing a game of making funny faces at each other. So if she's going to make sure to include such little details like that, how is she going to leave out someone stopping by the apartment and seeing her not once, but twice? And when we start talking about Amanda's false confession against Patrick Lumumba, honestly, I feel like it's more of a false accusation because she's not confessing to anything. She's accusing Patrick of this crime. So when Amanda is being questioned by the police, she says that the only reason that she named Patrick was because the police were yelling at her and calling her a liar, saying that they knew she wasn't at Raffaele's apartment. So even at that point, she doesn't bring up Joanna Popovic stopping by. Like if that's me in her position and the police are yelling at me, calling me a liar, saying that they knew I wasn't at Raffaele's that night, and a complete non-related third-party person sees me there not once but twice, that is the first thing I'm going to be telling police. I'm going to say, okay, you don't believe me. You don't believe I was at Raffaele's that night. Go ask Joanna. She saw me there twice. But Amanda doesn't say this. She instead falsely accuses an innocent man that did nothing but try to help her and give her a job. Joanna says that she had to go to class that night. This was All Saints' Day. It was a national holiday, a religious national holiday. What class are you going to be having after 5 p.m. on a national holiday? Well, I remain extremely skeptical of the Popovic sightings. The prosecution would find them credible enough to include them in their timeline. And honestly, they probably didn't try to dispute them because even if they did happen, they don't actually provide an alibi for Amanda or Raffaele during the time of the murder. See, Popovic said she stopped by around 5:45 and 8:40. Meredith did not get back home that night until around 9 p.m. And the walk from Raffaele's place back to Pergola 7 is about 8 minutes max. So there's still plenty of time for them to have gotten from his place back to Pergola 7. Okay, that concludes our timeline up to November 1st. So I think I'm going to end the video here for right now. Y'all will end up getting a very edited version down of this video, but I have been filming for like 3 hours. I'm tired. I will pick up with our story in the next video. I'll go over morning of November 2nd. We'll go through the discovery of the crime scene. If you would like to be notified when that video drops or for any other future videos, please like and subscribe to stay up to date. I hope y'all made it to the end of this, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. Bye for now.